much for joining me today. Today, I'm going to talk about someone whose story you can't but find fascinating. I find this person's story compelling because it centers on reincarnation, a subject I've always considered both fascinating and deeply controversial. It's the kind of topic a person can lose themselves in for hours. I know I definitely have. So today I will be talking about Dorothy Eady's story. Her life took a dramatic turn before she was even old enough to remember it when she experienced a really terrible fall in London because Dorothy fell down a flight of stairs. She was super young at the time, only 3 when this tragedy occurred, and this fall was bad enough to where a doctor actually declared her deceased after the fall. And after a little bit of time, they realized Dorothy actually was alive. And I'm curious how often people are pronounced deceased but really are not, but that's kind of a side note there. However, this fall she took is what really was the turning point in her life, and her life would truly never be the same from that moment on. She was no longer just an ordinary girl, and this experience is really when she began to rediscover a part of herself she had long forgotten. She was your typical fun, loving little girl until things were noticeably different. Dorothy had never really experienced dreams before, but it was here that the reoccurring dreams returned, rising to the surface with a persistence where she could no longer ignore them. In her dreams, she saw what was a beautiful enchanted place with large white columns and big structures full of greenery and abundant with delicious fruits and beautiful flowers. And this place was literally breathtaking. And she called this place home, and she knew in her heart this was her home. And from that moment on, the memory of this existence stayed with her and was etched into her sense of self, continuously telling her parents how she wants to go home. No, not the place she currently lived, but back to the place she deeply and vividly dreamt about. And having what seemed to be constant night terrors, her parents were extremely concerned, waking up in the dead of the night to her blood-curdling screams. It seemed as though the place she called home wasn't as comforting as one would expect home to be. She also sometimes spoke with a strange foreign accent, and her parents could not make out what type of accent this was. And this has a name, and it's called foreign accent syndrome, and there are many known cases of people who have experienced this syndrome after an accident or possibly like a tumor or some type of neurological damage. But this definitely isn't unheard of. So her experiencing this is very possible and would not surprise me that she did experience this kind of syndrome. The new accent she spoke with didn't make things any easier for her. Her teachers were at a literal loss for words when she showed up with a strange accent, and she became kind of an outcast at school. She was even expelled from a religious all-girls school after not participating in singing a song that she perceived as belittling Egyptians. She said, "Nope, I refuse to listen to you speak badly about my people, the people I adore and I love, and I won't put up with this." Then things just continued to get even more unusual. Her parents decided to take her to a museum, but then when entering the Egyptian galleries, she was completely enamored with what she saw. Her eyes completely lit up, and shockingly, she saw familiar faces. It was as if she had wandered into a place that she had known her entire life. There were statues that she knew she had seen before. Her fondness was so apparent because she actually kissed their feet, saying, "These are my people, these are my people." And although Dorothy's odd behavior startled onlookers around them, and her parents were slightly embarrassed, understandably, by her reaction, it seemed to be the place Dorothy wanted to frequent the most. She begged and begged to return again and again, so they couldn't help but visit regularly because they saw just how happy she was whenever she was there. And I mean, you can only imagine what must have been going through her parents' minds. I'm sure her parents were just appalled and so puzzled, and probably thinking about how their daughter had just such a crazy imagination, but they probably brushed it off as just the typical vivid imagination children often have. She must have never forgotten the statues and her people, because at around the age of 6, she explained that the hieroglyphics she saw while visiting the museum were familiar to her. And as she immersed herself in books and photographs, she came across the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt. And she suddenly came to the realization that this is where she had once lived. However, it was missing the gorgeous garden that she claimed existed when the temple was her home. She would forever remember this garden because it was a beautiful oasis that she could never forget. This garden must have brought her so much peace and happiness because it was the driving factor in her rediscovering her home. And during my research, after looking at photos of this temple, I imagined how prosperous this area must have been around 1290 BC when Dorothy believed she lived there. And there were probably several beautiful lush gardens, and it was probably flourishing, full of life at that time. And so I can only imagine the beauty that was at this temple. And if you don't know about this temple, it was possibly used as part of the Osiris festival, used to worship the god Osiris and honor pharaohs. And I'm sure there were other reasons behind why this temple was built, but this is what Dorothy claimed to be her home. And Seti, who the temple was named after, is an Egyptian pharaoh who ruled between 1290 BC to 1279 BC. A part of me is almost jealous of what Dorothy experienced, the idea of accessing those hidden layers of existence. If reincarnation is real, just would be extraordinary. But at the same time, I'm not sure I'd want to witness every painful moment from every life that I've lived. And the beauty and the burden would definitely come as a package. Anywho, at the age of 10, she was spending much of her free time at the museum because this place is where she felt most comfortable as a child. And while other children played outside, she found herself inside, captivated by old weathered statues and artifacts. All of her time spent at the museum allowed her to meet a renowned Egyptologist named Sir Ernest Alfred Thomas Wallace Budge, say that 5 times fast, who worked at the museum and visited Egypt quite often to buy antiques and Egyptian collections. The more I researched him, the more I realized he's a very fascinating person who contributed to some of the world's best Egyptian antiques. He offers to teach Dorothy hieroglyphics because she was so eager to learn and felt a familiarity with this language. I think my parents might look at me pretty crazy if I told them I wanted to learn hieroglyphics, like, why not Spanish or something a little more common in today's times. And I'm sure her parents were pretty caught off guard by her new obsession, but I do love that they still explored this idea. Throughout the years into her early preteen years, Dorothy continued having dreams about this temple, and they continued to become more detailed and transparent of what were memories from a very far past life. Throughout these years, she gained more and more knowledge about this life with the help of these deep dreams. In her late 20s, fate led her to an Egyptian man whom she fell in love with and married, and eventually down the line welcomed a son. The dreams of her past life continued throughout this time and deepened, and she would wake up in the dead of night to write down these dreams in hieroglyphics, and she really was experiencing what seemed like a translate state, not even fully knowing at the time what was being translated or written. The person presenting these dreams to her was named Hora. She actually remembers a lot about this past life with the help of this guide, Hora. And Hora wasn't just anyone. No, they were the spirit of Seti I. This previous life definitely wasn't all colorful butterflies and rainbows. The story of this other life begins pretty rough, to say the least. Her mother dies when she is a young child, and her father ends up not being able to take care of her. So she is placed at the temple of Qam el Sultan, which is also located in Abydos, Egypt, which is an ancient site that existed around 3000 BCE. At this age of just 12, she was faced with a life-changing decision to either stay at the temple and be a priestess and start an apprenticeship, or start a new beginning with the unpredictable challenges of ordinary life, a hard decision for any child to have to make. Her choice was made clear because she ends up becoming a beautiful priestess. And just a little background on priestesses. Well, they're held in high regard in ancient Egypt. Priestesses could have had a lot of authority and control in ancient Egypt. They could serve as political figures and were seen to embody gods in their own way through music, dancing, and rituals. And some could argue that Cleopatra was similar to a priestess's early on in her life who actually rose to power. So it shows you the value some of these women really held in their positions. And later on in life, her and Pharaoh Seti I end up having a chance encounter, and she falls madly in love with Seti, and they had relations that were forbidden. This act ended up changing the trajectory of this past life she lived because it resulted in her becoming pregnant and then committing suicide. And the more I learned about why this act would have had such bad consequences is because as a priestess, she was valued so highly. And in such a role, you make a vow of virginity, and it was such a noble role. So an act like this could have had some really terrible consequences, especially for a priestess who took a vow to be a virgin. And this all makes sense because when she visited the high priestess to gain advice on what to do in this situation and what to do about this pregnancy, she was told that she could possibly be put to death through a trial for having this affair. Rather than facing public disgrace, she took her own life. So clearly, it's a bit of a sad ending to the story, and committing suicide is not necessarily a reoccurring thought that would be nice to have or to be dreaming about. And I also found some resources that claim that these memories from a distant past would only occur on what was said to be full moons. And I don't know how true this is, but if these dreams really did happen on full moons, like, wow, that would make this an even more surreal experience. So remember, she's still living in London at this time, and there she takes a job in an office for an Egyptian-based magazine and meets an Egyptian man who she marries. The couple ends up moving to Egypt, the place she dreamt of for most of her life, and she gains citizenship there. This is when she finally ends up moving back to her home after all of these years pondering how wonderful it would be to go back. And she has a son, and I'm sure you can't guess what she names him: Seti, after the pharaoh who she once was madly in love with, whom she commits suicide for. And if you think Dorothy was just making all of this up, it would be a very crazy thing, in my opinion, to name your kid after the pharaoh. It shows me that she had to have really believed in this previous life of hers. And it also makes me wonder if her husband believed her stories about these dreams, or maybe thought some of it was fabricated. But it seems as though he supported her on this journey. And Dorothy actually ends up changing her own name to Seti, meaning the mother of Seti. And she eventually becomes a widely admired Egyptologist, respected not only for her scholarship, but for the dedication she brought to every excavation. And after longing for the move for many years, she was finally transferred to Abydos, the place that had first captivated her heart. Even after her retirement, she continued working there, unwilling to leave the site that had eventually shaped her life. Becoming a trusted and prominent Egyptologist wasn't easy. She was constantly faced with criticisms from the colleagues around her. To remain close, she chose to live simply, almost aesthetically, in a tiny brick house where she had little more than just the essentials, and this simplicity was freedom for her because she was home once again. She never needed much. What she wanted was just to return to the place where everything had begun. In time, she decided that Abydos would not only be her life's work, but also her final resting place. She helped with excavations, and during one of the many excavations she helped with, she located the long lost ancient garden from her past memories alone. It was the same exact garden at the temple, the one from her dreams. And she was able to locate many other historical sites, including a tomb and a secret tunnel, which were not known by anyone else. The archaeologist swore she would never be able to locate it, yet she did, and she constantly proved them wrong. And she also claimed that the tomb of Nefertiti wasn't actually where the tomb was said to possibly be located, and instead it is in the Valley of the Kings. And just so you know, or just so you have some intel on what this is where around 65 tombs are said to be, and this is a site that was created for pharaohs to later rest. And she had been told the actual location of the tomb in her dreams when she had a conversation with a pharaoh. And is she correct? You know, is the tomb of Nefertiti really buried in the Valley of Kings? We still don't know because this tomb is still yet to be located. But how amazing would it be if the tomb of Nefertiti was actually located in this Valley of Kings? From what hardly seemed like just plain luck, although some were very skeptical of her, they just couldn't ignore that she was discovering sites that no one else had any knowledge of. So could this have been just plain luck? I mean, maybe, I guess so, but her intuitiveness and knowing was very puzzling and gained the respect of other Egyptologists. Her knowledge was just undeniable. They just couldn't refute what she knew. She even spoke of a secret chamber before her passing, but sadly, Dorothy passes away and the secret chamber is never found. Dorothy passed away on April 21st, 1981, in a quiet village next to the sacred temple city of Abydos. And Seti had once said herself, "Death holds no terror for me. I'll just do my best to get through the judgment. I'm going to come before Osiris, who will probably give me a few dirty looks because I know I've committed some things I shouldn't have." Because she passed, it's hard to tell where to start looking for this secret chamber Dorothy swears existed, but I believe there is a hidden chamber because she was accurate about just so many other things and so many historical sites. And the headstone created for her passing seems just so very fitting for her. It has a figure of Isis with her wings outspread, and I wasn't able to confirm that this is how the headstone actually looks because I tried to find a photo of the headstone and I wasn't able to locate it, but I really hope it does look like this because it really does sound very perfect for her. But this whole experience really did change her life for the good or bad. That's up to you to decide. Reports of children describing past life memories are far more common than most people probably realize, and it could be argued that if parents engaged more deeply with their children's early statements, rather than just dismissing them as imagination, these young storytellers might reveal even richer details about the lives they recall. And some of these cases are surprisingly difficult to explain away, especially when the information is so specific and consistent and also verifiable. In Dorothy's case, she didn't wait for adults to guide her. No, she took it upon herself to keep searching, to follow every thread of memory until it led somewhere real. Her passion and determination to understand the life she felt most connected to is what ultimately allowed her to uncover so much. So what do you think? Was Dorothy simply a woman with an extraordinary imagination, or could her memories be evidence of something far more mysterious? Could she truly have been the reincarnation of someone who lived centuries before her? Or is there another explanation waiting to be uncovered? Anywho, I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you like this video, don't forget to click subscribe and also follow me on Instagram. Thank you again.